With their towering vending machines of used cars, Carvana has taken a beating in the press from claims that they've sold cars without providing titles to buyers and failed to perform necessary inspections in states such as North Carolina and Illinois. In fact, they even had their license suspended in Michigan for allegedly failing to comply with state vehicle codes, and were cited twice in Illinois for such alleged offenses as issuing out-of-state temporary registrations. In Pennsylvania, they were taken to court in a class action suit over claims that they failed to transfer ownership to buyers after sales were completed. And all this in the midst of inner turmoil that saw tumbling revenue, countless layoffs, and a stock price with all the upward mobility of a mobster in cinder block shoes. So, why is Carvana suddenly the biggest comeback story in the auto industry today? How on earth are they pulling off the sort of wild increase in stock price that they've generated in the past month? Because not only has Carvana improved their year-over-year prospects, they've become one of the most successful platforms for purchasing a used car today, at least among publicly traded options. So we need to investigate this, right? What's the deal? Is this a purely speculative growth, or has the company truly built itself a new path forward? Is this a suspicious, impractical amount of growth, or is it perfectly explained by the factors surrounding the used car market today? How did a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy less than 2 years ago suddenly change their fortunes entirely? Well, let's break out the magnifying glasses and the luminol, because we're going to have ourselves an investigation. It's the end of the month and you know precisely what it's time for. Hit it.
Roman report at the end of the month, and I make what I want when I feel like discussing cars.
So this month's story comes as a result of Carvana's third quarter earnings report from October 30th and the subsequent stock frenzy of early November, as the company saw record growth for the third fiscal quarter. Let's look at the numbers real quick for a bit of perspective. So net income was $148 million, while operating income was $337 million, and adjusted earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or EBITDA, numbering $429 million. This is a 34% increase year over year, which is wild when you consider that Carvana only accounts for roughly 1% of the used car market. That's their share from what I could find, which sounds cartoonishly low for a company this suddenly, inexplicably successful. But the numbers get even crazier the deeper you go into their earnings report, which I've linked in the description below, because the company sold 108,651 retail units for the quarter, driving total gross profit to $807 million. That sounds like a lot, right? And it should, because this is a 67% increase. Per a Financial Times article on the growth, the total market value of Carvana has exploded from $1 billion with a B, to over $50 billion in less than 2 years. The third quarter also marked another milestone as the company sold its 2 millionth car. As CEO Ernie Garcia III would point out to Forbes earlier this month, it took the company nearly a decade to sell 1 million cars, yet barely took 3 to sell the next million. And it's impressive in a way that almost doesn't make sense, considering this was a company that, once again, was on the verge of bankruptcy just 2 years ago, in December 2022. After their stock plummeted some 98% in value. How do you lose 98% of your value and live? Either this company is remarkably resilient or something else is going on, because according to Business Insider, Carvana stock has seen a mind-bending increase of 7,000% since then. So why the sudden growth? Alright, let's break this down into the possible theories and begin this investigation proper. Alright, so to talk about this, I need to go over what Carvana is and how it works. Now, I've never bought a car from them, so I had to look up their purchase process from their website. And the long and short of it is that you go to their website, search their inventory of vehicles for the car you want, and then click Get Started to begin checking out like you're on Amazon or something. You choose a payment method, disclose whether you want to apply a trade-in, and then you can upload whatever materials you need in order to proceed with the purchase. They aren't listed, but I would assume a driver's license and a proof of insurance would be among those materials, but I don't know. Once the verification team reviews everything and the purchase is approved, they'll either do the registration for you or give you instructions on how to do it in your state. But basically, once you press the Get Started button, the ball is rolling and you have to finish the purchase within a certain time frame, or else the car is released back into the pool of available vehicles and someone else could potentially snap it right up. The timer will extend the farther you get into the process, lengthening the reserve until you complete all the information and finalize the purchase by either submitting the down payment or paying the car in full, in addition to any shipping or delivery fees if you're not picking up the car in person, since those car vending machines are only in around 25 markets in the United States. Then you either schedule pickup or delivery, and there you go. It sounds simple enough, and not only simple, but attractive in its simplicity. Like an on-demand service for cars, it allows you to take impulse purchases to the next level. It's really kind of wild when you think about it, although I suppose this is not too unlike what you might be able to have done with eBay Motors in some cases, but I digress. You see, because for as simple as this process seems, you begin scrolling and you come to a realization. It looks like a lot of these cars are wildly overpriced for what you're getting. For example, Kelley Blue Book places the fair purchase price on a 2013 Hyundai Genesis at approximately $7,109 for the 3.8-liter model. I looked one up on Carvana, and literally the first result for the same vehicle and model year, excluding delivery or shipping fees, local taxes, title, registration, all that stuff, that same vehicle was priced at $18,990 as of the time of this recording. Now, the Carvana model has only logged 5,000 miles, so in a way that kind of explains the price difference. But then why is a 2015 Jeep Wrangler Unlimited Sport with 51,000 miles running for nearly $24,000 when Kelley Blue Book has it costing barely above $16,000? This more or less tracks with a 2023 report from CarEdge, which found that some prices on used models were pretty close to new. The example they cited was a 2022 Ram 1500 Crew Cab with 12,667 miles, which carried an asking price of $45,990 during a period when truck prices were generally on the decline. Interestingly, Carvana once claimed an average savings of $2,199 over dealerships, as discovered by Forbes contributor Jeremy Alacandri using the good old internet Wayback Machine. At the time, Carvana cited Kelley Blue Book and Edmunds to support and legitimize this statement. However, when Alacandri reached out to the respective outlets for comment, a representative for Cox Media Relations, which oversees Kelley Blue Book, stated that they, quote, cannot endorse the accuracy of this information, end quote. Meanwhile, the Associate Director of PR and Communications for Edmunds stated, quote, based on this information alone, we cannot validate the claim that a consumer purchasing a vehicle from Carvana should expect savings versus a traditional car dealer. Edmunds data shows that the average dock fee for used vehicles is currently $369, but that's a smaller component of their calculation, and we don't have visibility into the other key elements of their equation, which appears to be all internal Carvana data, most notably historical pricing data and interest rates. End quote. In reaching out to auto industry data and pricing firm VinQ, Alejandri was told that their algorithm came to a completely different conclusion than Carvana's internal metrics. Quote, when asked for specifics on Carvana, VinQ's algorithm found that when comparing the average price of similar vehicles by year, make, model, and trim level listed on Carvana's site versus franchise dealership sites, Carvana's prices were higher 72% of the time. When the same comparison was made with independent dealerships, Carvana was priced higher 74% of the time. End quote. Not only were no savings in evidence, it seemed like Carvana was moving laterally, as the article notes that a then-new 2022 Toyota Tacoma was going for $39,560, while a similar late-model used Tacoma on Carvana ran $39,765. And really, why would you buy used when the pricing was essentially the same as new? The defense, of course, is that you aren't dealing with the outrageous upcharges that you'd be saddled with at a dealership, which will sell a car at a seemingly low price and then make it up on the back end with fees, services, all this stuff that weighs on the wallet. But even then, Carvana has an in-house lender for financing, which isn't typically the case for dealerships who use outside lenders. Carvana more or less has a partnership with Ally Financial, so they're not really working with, JP Morgan or insert federal credit union here. They've sort of got their own thing going on. Even if I really don't know that you can technically call that in-house still, but, well, as the Forbes article notes, from 2018 until 2021, the average dealership financing rate on a used car was 8.76%. At Carvana, 13.41%. And Carvana themselves stated that close to 3/4 of the cars sold through their e-commerce platform are financed. And while it sounds nice that your finance price is guaranteed for 30 days from approval and you have a 7-day money-back guarantee if you don't like the car for any reason or you find problems, well, you're still going to have that inquiry on your credit, which brings me back around to the first theory of why Carvana has seen this growth. By charging more, they've seen revenue increase substantially. But then, this could simply be the necessity of how they get their cars in the first place. According to their website, their inventory sources are, quote, auctions, trade-ins, partnered dealerships, and customers who sell their vehicle to Carvana, end quote. Profit margins could be higher on a car that they acquire cheaply and then turn around and sell at a premium, but generally speaking, one would think that auction acquisitions and dealership sales would be a bit on the pricier end, meaning that in order to make a profit, they would need to pass those expenses on to the consumer. And to be fair, literally every automotive retailer does this, especially depending on demand for certain vehicles and inventory supply. So one would think we'd see this kind of growth in other retailers, right? Yet we're only really seeing it with Carvana. And oddly enough, Carvana might not even be acquiring their cars in entirely the same way anymore, because it appears they've made a significant change since 2022 in how they acquire their cars, and we're going to talk about it later on in the video. It's very interesting to me. But first, we kind of have to go over one of the more outlandish theories for why Carvana has seen such growth in the past month, specifically with regards to their stock price. Yes, theory number 1, they're charging more. But theory number 2, well, it's Mother Nature. Alright, so let's get the most salacious theory out of the way. Granted, I've only seen this one proposed on places like Reddit and Twitter. Yet I think it's kind of interesting from a causality standpoint because you could see the argument for how this would work. As the theory goes, because Hurricane Helene was quickly followed by Hurricane Milton, Florida and the surrounding southeastern United States were suddenly placed in a terrible position. Not only did the storms claim vehicles left and right, one would think the storms also claimed the retail outlets that people used to buy cars in the first place, as a hurricane isn't exactly going to spare a dealership just because people may need to buy a new car after the storm has passed through. Mother Nature is dispassionate about her destruction. But as the theory goes, since Carvana can essentially get a car to you from wherever, they come out on top in this particular scenario, as displaced citizens look to replace their lost vehicles quickly. Hence, an increase in sales, leading to an increase in the stock price. Now, I can understand why some would propose this theory, yet I can also see why it didn't really take off. For one, I don't think sales in the southeastern United States in the final weeks of the financial quarter would account for this sort of growth, although I suppose you could claim it as a reason for the stock price getting that jolt that it got at the end of October. Because you used to be able to get Carvana stock for peanuts, and now I think last time I checked it's nearly $300 a share. But even then, the storm doesn't seem like the sort of thing you could actually point to and say, yes, this is the cause, this is why Carvana is thriving. Because realistically, they aren't the only outlet. You'd have seen CarMax spiking if that were the case. It's unlikely that a natural disaster would only benefit one used car retailer and no others, even if we do allow for the realistic likelihood that people recovering from a natural disaster would need a new means of transportation immediately. But even then, and please, somebody correct me if I'm way off base here, would a car necessarily be the first priority for somebody displaced by a storm? I've lived a remarkably fortunate life to be unfamiliar with the hurricane or natural disaster experience. I think the worst I ever experienced was when Redding got hit by that horrible hailstorm around 2013 that wrecked cars and storefronts indiscriminately. But even then, I didn't actually have a car at the time, so I was spared having to get my claim rejected like everybody else. However, if I had, say, been living in a glass house at the time, well, I would have been far more careful about throwing stones, but would I have prioritized a new car over something like temporary lodging, over food, over supplies? I honestly don't know, and this is where I'd reach out to you for your insight. Have you ever been displaced by a natural disaster that claimed your vehicle? What were your priorities in the aftermath? I'm genuinely interested to hear your responses, truly. With that said, I don't know that the hurricane lifted Carvana to new heights theory holds a whole lot of weight. It just doesn't seem like a plausible theory, you know? So what's a more sensible one, then? People hate dealerships. The end. On to theory number 4. No, but seriously, I don't think I can overstate the disdain a lot of consumers have for the modern dealership experience. From the markups, the aggressive loans, the hidden fees, the glad-handing associates, and generally unhelpful service that many have experienced at in-person retail locations. And no, this is not all dealerships. Not by a long shot. Believe it or not, there are good ones out there, and I'm not just talking about Kunkelman Chevrolet either. But I think the events of 2020 made people realize that they didn't really need dealerships in the way they always had. That purchasing online was completely viable. Because Carvana did see rapid growth once everyone was forced inside. And what is this? I can have my car delivered, and there are no dealer fees, and a good selection? And really, Carvana's profile started to take off with Super Bowl ads and those car vending machines that got so much attention, even though they were roughly equivalent to a new car showroom in terms of putting all their attribute points into presentation. But it would be madness to pretend that Carvana didn't open a lot of eyes to online car purchasing at a time where people were mostly looking things up on Craigslist to try and find a deal. Yeah, you would think people wouldn't be buying cars at a time where businesses were closed and people were working from home. And it was true, to a point. But the decline mostly affected new cars. If anything, used cars continued to see sales increases. It's partially why used car prices went up at least in the years immediately following 2020. And Carvana was there, leaning into the e-commerce experience, liberating people from feeling like they were at the mercy of dealerships. Yet I don't think this is why Carvana is succeeding right now. And the main reason is because their business basically cratered after what pretty much turned out to be an artificial boom. Remember, this is a company that nearly declared bankruptcy in December 2022. They were close to having to call it a day entirely. If market forces had shifted away permanently from in-person retail, then you would anticipate that Carvana and its competitors would all enjoy widespread growth and sustained profits. But that hasn't been the case these last 4 years. And while it's true that people don't seem to enjoy going to dealerships due to their high prices and allegedly sketchy services, Carvana has been credibly accused of those same practices and worse. Not just the high prices or the in-house lenders setting higher than average interest rates, but stuff like, say, a Denver man in 2022 accusing the company of selling him a car with multiple open titles due to being stolen from a Hertz rental service at the Memphis airport. Or the woman from Maine who reported that Carvana sold her a car with undisclosed issues that gave out at a gas station. She alleged that Carvana told her they'd send someone out there to get it, but no one ever came, and the car was sent to an impound lot that told her it'd be $1,700 to get out. Carvana then told her they would only pay $500 of that $1,700 and she'd be on the hook for the rest, and that if she didn't get the car out, the car would essentially be repossessed, which would affect her credit score. Now, to corporate's credit, once the story went viral, they paid the woman $2,000, $1,700 reimbursement for the impound lot, and an extra $300 for everything her local branch of Carvana put her through. The office putting her through all that in the first place is diabolical work. But, again, this was in 2022, prior to this mammoth resurgence, to where it doesn't feel like any negatives in the aftermath of their near demise in December of that same year has gained much traction. Which is why we need to find another reason for Carvana's rise. Alright, so this is the theory I probably should have let off with, but then it's not really all that salacious, it's simply numbers. The higher interest rates and higher vehicle prices earlier in the 2020s cut both ways, as Carvana was struggling too. Again, they almost closed down. So what did they do? What did they do in 2023 that essentially saved them from insolvency? Well, it's not a sexy answer, but as explained in a CNBC article published in February of this year, the 2023 turnaround had many fathers. Quote, the Tempe, Arizona-based company has taken $1.1 billion of annualized expenses out of the business, reduced headcounts by more than 4,000 people, and launched a new proprietary Carly software platform for end-to-end processing of vehicle reconditioning, as well as other AI or machine learning systems for pricing and sales. The systems replaced previous processes that involved manually inputting data into separate systems or spreadsheets. End quote. Later in 2023, the company would introduce same-day delivery, which is available in 7 states. Well, 5 states: Alabama, Arizona, Indiana, North Carolina, and Georgia, and then the Dallas-Fort Worth region of Texas and Central Florida. Just Central Florida, forget about everyone else, I guess. These were all value adds to the company's profile and the perception that they were the most accessible, convenient way to purchase a car, and also the quickest. But the aspect that helped the company in 2023 was actually something they did in 2022, that wretched year. They bought ADESA, the second largest wholesale automotive auction chain. This move had several net positives to the company in the 2 years that followed that essentially saved Carvana. Earlier I talked about sort of a change in how they approached acquiring cars, and ADESA is that change. Or rather than a change, it's more of an escalation of how they did things already, streamlining the process and essentially bringing it all in-house. Let me explain. You see, With about 56 ADESA auction outlets operating at the moment, Carvana gained access to a new avenue for inventory, increasing its retail volume and supplementing as they already do with sourced inventory from the aforementioned partnered dealerships, private sellers, and trade-ins. In a way, they're taking as much of their business in-house as possible to reduce costs and increase efficiency. For better or worse, those are your auctions, like Carvana, those are your auctions. And so you now have access to those auctions where you might not have before. And it's all coming from an outlet that you own. So I imagine any attendant fees that go along with purchasing at auction from one of these companies or one of these auction outlets would be waived, or at least if they weren't, they'd be going back into the company as it were. But they're also using all this real estate they've purchased through the ADESA sale, which ran them an ice-cold $2.2 billion to create their own compounds for processing these cars and providing things like inspection services and reconditioning in preparation for sale. And they then coupled this with the aforementioned Carly real-time inventory management system, which allows them to track where each vehicle is in its preparation process and which processes it has left to go through. Maybe it needs to be inspected, or maybe it was just inspected and is now waiting to go through reconditioning, or some other tune-up or detailing before it's ready for sale. This helps reduce costs by making the entire process more efficient because they could scale the business without having to utilize third parties or build new sites from the ground up. In a lot of ways, I think this theory might actually be the answer. Maybe not for why the stock price suddenly jumped up last month. That I'm still not sure about. But maybe it was just that all of these positive changes took time to be reflected in the market. I don't know. But I'm willing to call it right now. This here is the reason Carvana was able to bounce back. Yet we do need to explore one last theory concerning Carvana's success. Perhaps the least glamorous theory of them all, but an important one nonetheless. Is it possible that Carvana's not actually doing as well as it seems? Well, despite a tremendously sunny outlook, there is still cause for tempering some of the enthusiasm for Carvana's growth, as Bloomberg reports that Carvana still has around $5.4 billion in long-term debt, in addition to interest payments of $157 million for this quarter alone. The interest they owe is roughly $9 million more than their total net income. So that's not great. Neither is the fact that they're expected to be paying upwards of $668 million in interest this year alone. But even this isn't the damper that you'd think, since the current financial outlook for the company suggests they'll be able to clear that debt sooner rather than later, particularly if they're able to restructure the debt in some way, but then I guess that's for the bean counters and financial people to figure out. However, this all depends on certain things that no one can predict. How will the automotive marketplace look a year from now, 2 years from now? What are the used car prices going to be like? The interest rates, I mean, theoretically, moving so much of the business in-house should increase risk, not reduce it, right? You're becoming less dependent on third parties to help sustain your business model, and that's a good thing. Except when things go pear-shaped, it tends to all land directly on your front doorstep. For example, it would appear that auto loan delinquency with Carvana is on the rise, to the tune of some 12.6% of loans, which should end up hurting the company's financial outlook when you remember that nearly 75% of all car sales on Carvana are financed. Now, the 12.6% number represents the total loan balance on Carvana underwritten loans, with the measurement period beginning back in 2023. But for argument's sake, let's do the math real quick, using Q3 sales numbers as an example. Now, the earnings report claims 108,651 retail units were sold in Q3. So 75% of 10861 is 81,488, and then 12.6% of that number, punch that in. And okay, so if we were to only use the cars sold this past quarter as an example, the equivalent delinquency would be that out of 81,488 vehicle loans granted, 10,267 were in some state of delinquency. But again, I'm terrible at math, so feel free to correct me in the comments. However, the point is that Carvana may be looking at a reckoning with the loans they're underwriting if people are unable to pay. As analyst Dave Kranzler wrote in an October article for Seeking Alpha, from which some of the above financial information was sourced, Ally Financial might be tightening their belt in terms of their loan financing, their standards for underwriting. And that is going to affect Carvana. Quote, Carvana has a master purchase and sale agreement with Ally in the amount of $4 billion, which enables Carvana to sell the loans it originates to Ally, subject to certain underwriting criteria. End quote. And so the implication here is that new terms are likely to be negotiated when the deal comes up in January 2025, with Ally being less likely to be on board with handing out loans like their Valentines. It's probably going to become a lot more like VC in 2K, more expensive than the end product is probably worth. And the likelihood is that it's going to hurt sales at Carvana into 2025, even though they're still probably going to be able to operate successfully and stably without fear of imminent closure or bankruptcy. But I also have to be realistic about where Carvana is at right now. So, honestly, they're kinda crushing it right now, in a way that goes beyond the ability of luck to explain. I am not a finance person at all. This is not financial advice in any way whatsoever. Please don't ever listen to me about that kind of thing. But it does seem like a lot of analysts are ranking this stock very highly. Now, I don't know what the future holds for Carvana's stock health, but overall, the company seems like it's doing really well. I swear, it really isn't clickbait to say that Carvana is crushing it. But I guess whether or not they deserve all this success is another matter entirely, because I know a lot of people don't really like Carvana and don't inherently trust Carvana. But by the same token, if you ever go to the Carvana subreddit, you have a lot of people who are really interested in giving the company a fair shake and have shared good experiences with the company and fair criticisms. It's pretty balanced. So I'm interested to hear what your experiences with Carvana have been, if you have any at all. While Dave Kranzler's article suggests that Carvana is actually overvalued, it feels like it may take a while for this to be reflected in the market, just as it took time for their positive growth to be similarly reflected by this increase that, to us car nerds, appears inexplicable, yet has its foundation in the measures taken in 2023 to shore up business for the future. And, well, I guess that's as good an explanation as any. Carvana is in a prime position to make a lot of money, and while the company has taken great pains to gradually strengthen the financial outlook for their business, this sudden growth kinda seems like it came out of nowhere, right? But at the end of the day, I'm not sure it did. Ultimately, the success of Carvana could probably serve as a lesson to other companies that just keep barreling forward as they have been, without showing any real inclination to change with the demands of the time, and of the market in which they operate. The less said about Stellantis, the better. And don't even get me started on the Jaguar rebrand. Ugh, brother, ugh. What's that? What's that, brother? But what do you think? Is Carvana better than its reputation? Or do you feel the skepticism is justified? What about the brand's sudden success? What factors do you think contributed? Let me know in the comments. Until then, if you like this show, please consider sharing the video, commenting, liking, or even subscribing. If you'd like to support the show in an even bigger way, please consider supporting us on Patreon. The link is in the description. To anyone celebrating, have a great Thanksgiving weekend, and to the rest of the world, have an amazing week. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers. I'm a tank of love apart. apologies to you, and I'll make it right before the light sneaks through. I will let go of the past, grab the future with both my hands, and be near love, be near love, be near love.